Okay, so where we see that the UFO is now gaining acceptance in the minds of the public, this Steven Spielberg Taken series, what a deal. I mean, a lot of Hollywoodization there, and of course they had to make up some stuff because they had a story, they had to end their story, and the real story hasn't ended, okay? But yet, for those of you who've done your homework, you'll realize that about the first 8 episodes of that show is fully backed by evidence, by testimony, and by documentation. So the idea of the UFO is growing in acceptance. Lagging behind is a parallel issue about the control of secret societies and how they tie together and how that they are pushing harder than ever at this very moment for what they call globalization, or what you may have heard referred to as the New World Order, okay? It's nothing new about it. It's the oldest game on the planet, and they're still pushing it. So I can see that at some point in the near future, these two issues are going to blend together. They're going to meet, and we're going to have a whole new paradigm to deal with. So I'm going to give you folks a little leg up. My initial thesis going into Rule by Secrecy was that these secret societies are not isolated groups, that they do connect, and in fact connect all the way back through history. And I was right. And you can read all about that. So I'm going to quickly run you through the modern secret societies and how they connect, and I'm going to try to do this as rapidly as possible to get to the really good stuff. And some of you all are going to start saying, well, what's this got to do with UFOs? Bear with me, and I think you'll find out. We'll start with the Trilateral Commission, which is one of the more recent ones. This was formed in 1973 by David Rockefeller and one of his henchmen, Zygmunt Brzezinski. And it was obviously an outgrowth and extension of the even older and more secretive Council on Foreign Relations, because David Rockefeller and Brzezinski were both members. All 7 original members of the Council on Foreign Relations were members of the, 7 members of the Trilateral Commission were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. So it's safe to say that it was simply a little more open, a little more public, extension of the Council on Foreign Relations. What it also did was, because of its name, trilateral, which refers to the trilateral nations of Japan at that time, to include China now, North America and Europe, the trilateral nations. And so not only was it an effort to have a little bit more open, less secretive organization, but to also to include the Asian economies. They put out various position papers, and I particularly like the one they issued in 1975, Democracy in Crisis, where they basically said and argued that, there's a little bit too much democracy in the United States, and it's just really not good for business, so maybe we need to curtail that a little bit. Now, that was 1975, and I asked some of you older folks here about my age, do we have more or less democracy in the United States today? Seems like that they're getting what they want. You might also notice, I found it interesting, the logo of the Trilateral Commission looks suspiciously like a stylized swastika. And that may not be my imagination, as you will soon see. Senator Barry Goldwater, in his book, With No Apologies, just flat stated that the Trilateral Commission is intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidation of the commercial banking interest by seizing control of the political government of the United States. And in fact, that seems to be what exactly is going on right now, is a merging of corporate with federal government. Which brings us to George W. Bush, who I call a post-turtle. Some of you say, what's a post-turtle? Well, that's a term we have down in Texas. You're driving down a country road and you see a turtle perched up on top of a fence post. That's a post-turtle. You know he didn't get there by himself. You know somebody put him up to it. And you know he can't do anything while he's up there. And basically all you want to do is help the poor creature down. Post turtle. If it wasn't so serious about what's going on, it really would be pretty laughable. So now that tracks back to the even more secretive Council on Foreign Relations. This was formed in 1921 by a group of people that were including Colonel House, who was the right-hand man, shadow to Woodrow Wilson. And their whole avowed purpose was to educate the American public on the desirability of global government. And why did they feel like they had to do that? Because they had already made their first attempt, the League of Nations. Okay? But it didn't work. Why? Because the Senate of the United States said, I'm not sure we're ready to give up our national sovereignty. How many times have you heard the politicians in the last year or two talk about sovereignty? They don't talk about it, do they? For that matter, when's the last time you heard a national politician refer to the republic? They don't talk about that much either, do they? And while we're here, let's stop and briefly and let's explain what I'm talking about here. Oh, all they talk about is democracy. Democracy. God save democracy. We love democracy. The terrorists hate democracy. Well, what is democracy? Democracy is ruled by the majority. What's the primary example of democracy in action? A lynch mob. Okay? Everybody says lynch him, so they do. Folks, this is not what we were handed by our ancestors. This was never intended to be a pure democracy. What we are supposed to have in this country, with its Constitution, its Bill of Rights, is a democratic republic. Now, what's the difference? In a pure democracy, the lynch mob. Lynch him, okay? You string him up. In a democratic republic, you have to go through a system of laws, checks and balances, courtroom procedure. You have to give the guy a fair trial. There are certain procedures and laws that you have to follow. He has the right to meet his accuser. He has the right to defense. He has the right to cross-examine the evidence and the witnesses against him. And then if he's found guilty, then you can hang him. Okay? That's what we're supposed to have. And this is not what we have now, is it? Now they can grab you, lock you up, and if one man, John Ashcroft, who's up until 9/11's whole claim to fame was throwing covers over the bare breast of statues in Washington, D.C. because he was upset. Oh. Talk about a boob. I didn't say that. But on his word alone, you can be declared an enemy combatant and held without trial and without legal representation.